By 8 o'clock tonight, the United States may launch massive strikes against Iranian civilian infrastructure. President Trump has issued an ultimatum demanding the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, explicitly threatening that if a deal isn't reached, a whole civilization will die tonight. This deadline comes after 6 weeks of heavy conflict across the Middle East. With airstrikes and ground skirmishes spreading across the region, the death toll has already surpassed 3,400 people. The immediate trigger for tonight's standoff is happening right here. This map shows the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow maritime choke point that Iran has completely strangled with a total blockade. The U.S. military is the most powerful conventional force on the planet, but warships and stealth bombers haven't been able to break this seal. The conflict has degraded into a brutal stalemate, a military superpower trapped by an adversary wielding geographic and economic leverage.
Roughly 20% of the world's entire oil supply has to pass through this single artery to reach Europe, Asia, and the Americas. When that artery is severed, the paralysis is immediate. Out on the open ocean, dozens of massive tankers and cargo ships are currently dead in the water, stuck in a holding pattern that is slowly suffocating global supply chains. A fighter jet can destroy a bunker, but closing the strait starves entire nations of fuel. It neutralizes a superior force by targeting its economic foundations rather than its frontline defenses. By sealing off this narrow stretch of water, Iran has held the global economy hostage without needing to win a single conventional battle. The United States responded with intense military force. Overnight, airstrikes pounded Kharg Island, targeting dozens of military bunkers, storage facilities, and air defense systems. Through a massive network of underwater pipelines, this single island handles over 90% of Iran's crude oil sales. Alongside the U.S. effort, the Israeli military has been conducting its own wide-scale airstrikes. They've hit critical railway bridges across Iran and leveled a key petrochemical facility in Shiraz, responsible for producing explosive components. Despite intense strikes on Kharg Island, the target list excludes the actual oil infrastructure. If those reserves are destroyed now, Washington loses its final point of leverage. Keeping the export facilities intact is the only way to eventually force the strait back open. Iran's response relies entirely on an economic counterstrike. Rather than trying to match U.S. and Israeli airstrikes jet for jet, Tehran is focusing its energy on squeezing the global markets. The impact is already hitting consumers. The price of crude oil has surged past $100 a barrel, and here in the U.S., the national average for a gallon of regular gas has spiked to $4.14. In Europe, the situation is even tighter. Nearly 1 in 5 service stations in France ran completely dry of fuel this week, forcing the government to dispatch hundreds of emergency resupply trucks just to keep motorists moving. The head of the International Energy Agency has warned that this disruption is more serious than the global energy crises of 1973 and 1979 combined. When gas prices soar and basic utilities become scarce, the political pressure on Western leaders intensifies, often forcing a negotiation faster than losses on a battlefield. Inside Iran, the public response has escalated rapidly. State media claims over 14 million Iranians have volunteered to fight, and civilians are organizing human chains to form physical barriers around vulnerable power plants and bridges. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has issued its own ultimatum. If the U.S. strikes these civilian facilities, Tehran will retaliate by cutting off the region's oil and gas to the west for years. By preparing to level civilian infrastructure, the U.S. administration is openly moving toward collective punishment of the Iranian people. Human rights experts warn that deliberately targeting non-military facilities to terrorize a population is a violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention. When traditional military dominance fails to break a blockade, the options narrow toward extremes, making the threat of war crimes a standard component of modern diplomacy. As the 8 o'clock deadline closes in, diplomats are scrambling. Frantic backdoor negotiations are currently being brokered through intermediaries in Pakistan and Egypt, attempting to piece together a temporary 45-day ceasefire. Vice President J.D. Vance has made it clear that the U.S. has, quote, tools in our toolkit that we so far haven't decided to use. He warned that Washington is fully prepared to exact much greater pain if Tehran refuses to back down. Whether a deal is reached by 8 p.m. or the strikes move forward, the map of global conflict has been redrawn. A single bottleneck now holds the global energy grid at risk, and the open threat to destroy the infrastructure of an